So welcome everybody. I am still trying to mess around and I can't ever get my self situated very well before we start all of this. Um, okay, well, I think I'm going to just go from here. So welcome to our Earthwalk Ways podcast here in February now. We're one day, um, past our uh, eclipse in Aquarius, and I wanted to mention that I had put on a special live broadcast over the Valentine's Day weekend on the spiritual meaning of relationship based on concepts in the Pathwork lecture. So if you didn't catch that, you might be interested in it, and I'll put the link in this description. Um, and so, yeah, we just had the solar eclipse in Aquarius, which kind of marks a big reset, and at the same time, we're entering into the new Chinese New Year of the Fire Horse, and we can feel, just in terms of the universal medicine wheel, especially in the northern hemisphere, we're at a time when the seed is quickening in the earth, and in a way, the earth herself is incubating a new vision for the coming year. And it's interesting to me because, all of these things sort of converge and many cultures and yet pointing to a very similar sort of invitation and pattern that, again, is part of the natural cycles that I think it helps us to reconnect with. So, as well as all of that, we're actually beginning Lent and Ramadan, right? And in a way, these are each also forms of, uh, you know, preparation, cleansing preparation, questing, all of these kinds of things, making a deeper connection to spirit. And of course, we all felt blessed by the Buddhist monks that with their walk of peace, came through our area, and I think, was also a form of pilgrimage, a form of, you know, holding a space, for themselves, but also for the world. So, I think all of these things are here at this time because, in a way, this is a kind of aspect of this time where we can begin our preparation, our reconnection, our calling for vision for this new beginning that we're coming into in this season overall, universal season, and also in the season of this year. So it seems like there's sort of this obvious theme, this archetypal ruler that it also reflected, interestingly, in in the medicine wheel. Like there's this northeast direction of the Zero Chiefs Council wheel, and there's a lodge there in that northeast that's known as the Dog Soldiers Lodge, and that's the very end of the journey around the medicine wheel. Um, and also around the decision wheel. That's really what the council wheel is. It's a way of sort of looking at the whole in order to find and make a decision. And so, sort of the last question that you're presented is kind of held in the saying of that lodge, which is the dog soldiers. They take a vow. They take a vow to protect the children and the children's children until the sun no longer rises and the moon no longer sets. So, there's this quest for a life purpose and community, and then, the protection and the, alignment towards going forward into the future, you know, by understanding that it's the children that are the seeds of the future. And so, here we are in this, time of lots of shaking and everything. And so I think it helps to kind of remember all of this. And I want to invite and in this time, kind of share a little more about this understanding of a vision quest that might be something that you're called to give a try, and it's highly recommended. So it's the very first thing I did, when I came to this land. And it was kind of like a beautiful gift that was presented, and so before we had anything built or anything else, I did several vision quests on the creek, on the Nature Conservancy land that's right below. And so, holding this vision quest for myself, and then doing that here over many years, like it's just a kind of way that it's a real beautiful way of connecting back to nature in ways that we've forgotten, right? And also connecting back to ourselves and connecting to spirit. So we'll talk a little more about that in this session. So you can create a quest in all kinds of ways. It's best to set aside at least 4 days, and there's a preparatory period that really begins at the point that you decide to do a quest, right? Um, so, but the actual quest itself, 4 days is kind of like a traditional time. They could be longer. They say that there's this thing that they call a 3-day effect, which when we're like totally immersed in our inner world and we're not engaged in our outer social world, nature, yes, but not other people and that kind of thing, that it actually shifts our brain rhythms. And so they call it the 3-day effect. So there's a natural altering state of consciousness, especially if you have an opportunity to do this in nature. And nature is the perfect sanctuary, but not everybody has access. And so, a garden, or even if you create a little indoor sanctuary, that can work. And again, with Lent, and that's based on Jesus's, it's a 40-day period, preparation and fasting and connection, purification, um, in the wilderness. So he went into nature, and instead of 4 days, it was 40 days, right? And so this is part of the practice of Lent. And then in a similar way, Ramadan is also a 40-day period of fasting and purifying and service. So I might share a little bit more about some of these, holidays too, because again, they point to this archetype or this theme or this call that is a kind of collective or universal sort of part of the journey. So Ramadan is the ninth and holiest month of the Islamic calendar, observed by Muslims worldwide as a 30-day period of fasting, prayer, and reflection to commemorate the first revelation of the Quran to Prophet Muhammad. It is a time for spiritual purification, cultivating empathy for the poor, self-restraint, and strengthening community bonds. So, again, there's, very much similarities in Lent as well, right? So Lent is a 40-day, excluding Sundays and liturgical season, of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, symbolizing Jesus Christ's time of temptation in the wilderness. Beginning on Ash Wednesday and ending before Easter, it is a period for repentance, spiritual reflection, self-denial. The word originates from the Old English for spring. So, um, again, there's, much more in all of this, but you can kind of get the gist, right? That it's a call, and again, there's any time of the year you can, also do a pilgrimage, do a quest, um, do a deep inner journey. And in some ways, the Vision Quest is a little different, like Lent and Ramadan. These are like collective community processes, where the Vision Quest, traditionally was also often a rite of passage. And so it was related and important to the community, but it was an individual experience. Um, and so, in this way, it's, I think, also a beautiful thing, especially in our culture, to realize, that we can connect directly to spirit, to the life force, to guidance, to vision, to our own inner calling and direction. And we don't need the, outer community necessarily. I mean, in the traditional rite of passage, they were realizing that out of the experience would come the vision that would sort of help them understand the individual's rightful place in the community. So it was, woven back into the community, but it was this, celebration of an individual's unique gifts and calling. And so I think it's a beautiful way that, community supports individual and individual then supports community. So yeah, and there's also ways of working with this, in small groups and that sort of thing. If I'm hoping that you might think about your own personal vision quest this year, and I'd love to support people in doing their own vision quest. It can be done here at the Earthwalk retreat, or if you have a place in nature where you can be undisturbed for the time that you can set aside, then you can be supported wherever we can find ways of doing that. And then there are also some really fabulous and reputable Vision Quest schools. Um, I really like the Animas Valley Institute, founded by Bill Plotkin. It's in Colorado. But they have many nature-based programs, and they offer a quest program called Descent to Soul. And then I want to read a little more about the Vision Quest out of a book by Denise Lynn, who um, I didn't really look to see. This is a 1987 uh, copyright book, so for the first printing. So it's goes back there, 97, excuse me, but it's still back there a ways. And so there is in the notes, some information about getting in touch with uh, some people that are still kind of working with this process. Um, and so I will also put that. There's a naturalpathfinder.com, a woman, Catriona's Vision Quests. So that's out in the Northwest. So, we can maybe find, and there's, I'm sure, many, many, many others out there. But I do a really beautiful, very simple supported quest, and you're not out in the middle of the wilderness by any means or something like that. So sometimes it's a nice retreat quest for people that are a little more timid about being out alone, or are not so used to like a whole big wilderness kind of quest. So there's many options though, and so let me read. This is also a good book for people to check out. And again, there are others as well, but this is called Quest, a guide for creating your own vision quest, and it's by Denise Lynn and Meadow Lynn. So there's a realm beyond the physical senses. It is a realm of mystery and spirit. It's an infinite and eternal dimension that transcends form and goes beyond time and space. The search for this domain has gripped the hearts of human beings throughout history, from the early biblical prophets who walked alone into the desert to fast and pray for divine revelation to Native Americans setting out into the wilderness to search for a vision. The pursuit of an inner world beyond everyday physical reality is one of humankind's oldest traditions. For thousands of years, humans have retreated into nature in solitude to find answers to life's questions and to gain spiritual wisdom. Though many of the old ways have been forgotten, there remains a means by which anyone can step through the crack between two worlds and enter mythical and mystical dimensions. This retreat this quest is an ancient rite of passage. It's a journey to the center of your soul. And as we hurtle into the future, the trappings of modern life isolate us from Earth and leave little room for the inward journey. So this is one of the things that I've been very aware of is, like all of these things, there's so many things that we could be doing to support and help ourselves, and yet the world is full of, obligations and distractions, and, and trying to just keep things up and running because everything is, falling apart or not working right, or, or we can't reach the people that we need, or, so there's just, a million ways that we can just be consumed by our everyday life. And I get it. It's really hard not to. And yet, I think the more that we can, like the pathwork talks a lot about how, when we have sort of an attachment to negative pleasure, doing more, going faster, that there's a way that we have to feel and become conscious of the consequences. So, take time at least to really feel your exhaustion, or, feel the unhappiness in some way that's there because, like everything is kind of coming from a forced march. You're feeling enslaved to certain aspects of reality that, don't give you a free will, and a limited time to really do what you love, to take care of the things that matter to you. And so, it's real, and the more that we can kind of uh, not deny and push away, and just pretend and keep going, the better it is, because that our own inner being can become the guide, the signaling, the communication that we need, in order to listen more deeply into our true self, and what that needs in any moment. And hopefully in doing that, we will, and make the intention, and through that it will, set aside and carve out that time. It's almost like we have to actively create and hold the space that we need for ourselves these days. So yeah, so to, like really consider a retreat or a quest, sometime, as you're coming into this beginning of this new year. And any time is a good time, but this is a particularly good time coming up. So in the tribal people, the vision quest was an extension of a religious experience that was based on the earth they walked on, the sky above them, and the beauty of nature that permeated every waking moment. Life was seen as one long mystical sojourn in which the Creator spoke to them through every sunrise and every evening breeze. They knew they were constantly surrounded with messages and signs from the spiritual realms, and the vision quest allowed them to be still long enough so that they could listen intently to these messages. In ancient Native American tradition, a vision seeker usually climbed a mountain or went to a special place in nature. Sometimes their sacred site or dreaming place was a pit dug into the side of a hill. The seeker sat in the center of a special circle of stones that created a safe and holy place. Often this place for vision seeking had been used by the family for generations. The length of the vision quest varied from tribe to tribe. However, the seeker usually stayed for 4 days and nights, in some traditions without food or without water even. Um, So, again, we often can modify some of these things because, we're, it's just a lot for us to even spend 4 days and 4 nights out in nature with nothing to entertain ourselves or distract ourselves, right? So there's, many beautiful ways of adapting this work, and uh, there's a way that the quest is a powerful way to reclaim a sense of wonder and connection to the earth. And it can take the form of a journey into nature for solitude and for introspection that encourages answers to personal questions that, are going to rise from within. A process of simplification then occurs where you discover what is truly important in your life. You can begin to reach the source of any pain you may have so that it can be healed. And I think this is like an important one, because we have this kind of holding space of nature in our sacred space for our quest, and so what arises in that space, we're encouraged to just be with and hold it as we are held with it. And if we are in nature often, that also helps us deeply embody. And there's some preparation that you can do also to work with how to be present to the pain and to the things that might arise, the history that you might remember, the regrets, so there's a lot in terms of preparation, in terms of just knowing how to hold these things that are likely to surface for you. So a quest can also give you certainty about your future, as well as help you develop spiritual depth. It's an act of power that can change your life forever. And there are many ways to embark upon a quest in present times. You can trek into the wilderness where spiritual realizations are gained through survival, or make a pilgrimage to a sacred site. However, a quest can be as simple as taking an afternoon to sit in stillness in a forest, or experiencing solitude indoors in an especially prepared room. One form of quest requires sitting in nature for 3 to 4 days and nights. And that was what we were talking about before. And, so this was often used as a rite of passage into adulthood because it was felt that the visions received by young women or men were helped to determine the roles that they would play as adult members of their tribe. So we had spoken to that a little earlier. So basically, here's the list of, the quest is a kind of a heroic journey. Kind of stretches us, takes us out of our comfort zone, takes us into the unknown, takes us into the realm of just being, because there's nothing to do once you set up your camp. It's like really you're just there and being present, and you're not distracting yourself with cooking or anything like that so much. So as you don't bring a book to read, that sort of thing. You're just there with yourself, with what's all around you. And it's a rite of passage that carries you to an inner place of silence and majesty, and encourages you to live life more courageously and genuinely. The benefits of a quest are numerous. A quest can help you to discover who you are, connect more deeply to nature, define your life goals, find your purpose, gain power and clarity, connect to your higher self and the Creator, meet your guides, totems, and allies, find your true name, overcome fears and self-imposed limitations, heal abuse, grief, and anger issues, and heal relationship issues. So, it's a very beautiful way of just opening to our own inner resources to help us, truly meet and embrace and, work with whatever might be, our next step on the path, right? We're on this journey that life has presented, and there are challenges and boulders and things in the way, right? And we just kind of walk along and encounter them. And yet, they're not bad news or fate, or I mean, they are in some ways, but there's a way that we can meet them, as puzzles to be solved on the blackboard, or significant encounters with maybe even reflections of something within us, that's happening outside of us. So there's a lot of interesting ways. And so after this, time on the quest, you're also, it's a beautiful thing to come and share your journey, and you can keep a journal, but usually traditionally in a supported quest, you can do it on your own one, but there would be a time after the quest where you would, uh, in a way, present the experience as a sacred part of the quest as well, a sacred sharing, and a way that somebody else holds your journey as well, and that you can kind of deeply name and connect and remember the significances. And that goes on for a while, the integration of the experience, and you may find many other connections to it over time. But there's a beautiful kind of closing ceremony with it as well. And the whole thing, in a way, is a ceremonial process, right? Where you are, entering into this liminal realm, this threshold space in between the worlds. And so, we begin with saying goodbye to the world that you've known. And it's not like you're not carrying some of that in to this liminal space, but it's coming with you for you to, like work with it, to heal it, to um, complete it, to release it, to purify again, like, and so, you're not trying to not bring anything, like that with you. It's welcome in the quest, but it's kind of like a cocoon or an incubator in that quest space that will then transform what you're bringing in. And so, in a way, you're saying goodbye to what you've known. And then, during the quest time, like, again, there's many different possibilities, and I'll share some of that here as we go a little more. And there's some other good books to check out and learn about. But there's just this, process then where, you're there for that time, and, sort of deepening into your journey. And then it completes itself. And so then there's a process of closure and ending. And so the sharing is part of that ending process. And it becomes a journey in itself. So going into some of the specifics here, it's like, uh, we can explore the patterns in our lives, like there's sort of these consistent patterns in things, and these templates for life have, sometimes they're problematic, repetition, kind of difficulties of, frustrated or suffering kinds of experiences that we even notice. But there's also patterns, in nature and in the natural flow of things. And so there's a way that we can study, this whole thing about, patterning and flow, right? And how things get kind of looped into cycles, or how they begin to evolve and maybe become spirals instead, right? And transform themselves. Um, so, Quest can act as a catalyst for old issues to surface and heal. Right? And it can carry us into mystical and wondrous realms. So, there's in this book, there's like some samples and examples of people that have gone on quests that are sharing their experience, as she talks about this. But I'm going to jump over some of that and let you check out her book if you want. Uh, Let me just share a little, like, she outlines these main purposes, right? Or this main process. So she says vision quests come in many ways, and calling for a vision can be a lifelong process. However, there's power in setting aside time in your life for a quest. Your personal quest should consist of 6 parts. Number 1, purpose. This step entails defining the purpose of your retreat. What is your reason for going on a quest? Is there an area of your life that needs healing? Do you need to step beyond fears that are immobilizing your life? Do you need to seek a new direction in life? Do you need some time just to be still without having to do anything? These are all valid reasons to embark on a quest. Where your intention goes, your energy flows. As you define the purpose of your quest, the universe will propel you in the direction of your intention. Stage 2 is preparation. So what kind of quest are you going to do? How long will your quest be? What location have you chosen? Are you going to use a preparatory program? Have you dealt with all the obligations and cleared the time for your quest? All these questions should be addressed before you go on your quest. And then step 3 is leaving the world behind. On a vision quest, you leave the comfort of the boundaries of your environment and venture beyond what is safe and known. When one is always in comfortable surroundings, decisions and experiences are often based on repetitive, preconditioned responses. These responses are determined by one's environment, friends, and family. When you take the risk of stepping out of the boundaries of your everyday experiences, a fresh, new way of seeing yourself and the world around you can evolve. This can be done ideally by going into nature. However, as urban life consistently makes demands on our time and resources, a quest can also occur in a sheltered environment where you do not need to do anything and there are no external distractions, such as the phone or visitors, so that you can truly leave the world behind. So step 4, a life evaluation. And this can, maybe be done somewhat during the quest, but I think it can also be done in preparation. So, to tune in and do a little journaling and work on those larger, big questions of life. Who are you? What are you? Often we do things to give ourselves the impression that we exist. How do you know that you exist? What really gives meaning to your life? What are your priorities? Are you satisfied with your career and your relationships? Every act creates its own consequences. What are the consequences of your acts? Are you happy with the way your life is going? During this part of the quest, and so this is now she's referring to in during the quest, right? And yes, you can spend some time on your quest. You evaluate your personal history and face your fears and your death. This is the time to observe repetitive negative patterns in your life and to step beyond limiting definitions of self. This is the time to realize that you are not your past history, culture, society, religion, economic level, race, heritage, family, sex, body, or even your feelings and emotions. It is during this period that you explore who you truly are. When you take the time to examine your past, it prepares you for your future. 5 is being open for a vision. So the next step is to let go and completely be open to spirit. Quieting the mind is important because only when you're empty can you be filled. In the stillness, you can be in present time. So in this, I find is sort of the best use of our time on the quest. There can be times where we're doing a life review or something like that, but and periodically throughout, you may, be doing something, but come back or bring, this kind of presence awareness with you as you go through the time. And observe the signs in your surrounding environment and listen to the whispers of the universe. This is the time of symbolic death and rebirth into a new way of being in the world. Learn how to live a life that matters. Your vision helps shape your destiny, and those who find their destiny find happiness. And then the last part is returning home. So endings are as important as beginnings. Give yourself time to re-enter your life slowly and to integrate your experiences. When you cross the threshold back into ordinary world, you may feel reluctant to return. Overpowering reluctance may be a form of self-indulgence. You have taken the sacred inner journey and now you're returning to your everyday life to give something of what you gained from your experience to each individual you meet and to the world at large. This is the power of the quest. So, when you're coming out, then, we share it. We bring it out into the world through just our energy, our radiance, our living of our truth and our, awareness sort of this regenerative space, of the stillness within us and, if you think about it, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, that there are these three portals to now. And so there's the, internal sensory where we go in and we feel, what's happening inside of us, our energy flows, our inner atmosphere, our moods, and, our, maybe our thoughts that are, kind of going on and on or something like that. So we're just aware, what my inner space, is like. And so that's here now in this moment, right? We're not thinking about it, we're experiencing it directly. And then we can report about it. And then there's another portal to now that, is the outer sensory, which is, the experience of the space that you're in, the room that you're in, the chair you're sitting on, but also all of nature. And nature is this beautiful and very, important and profound space that calls us both into the present, that lives there. That's where its intelligence resides, and that's where we can connect with it and communicate with it. And so, and it's just full of fascination. It's like we don't get bored in nature, if we are open in our heart, in our sensory. And it's interesting that the sensory connections of our body, of our experiential, come connected to the heart chakra, right? So when we're in our mind and we're thinking, like we're really not in our hearts and we're not feeling. And there's sort of two different, modalities that we have, and they have both their purposes. But on the quest, you're going to be in your heart and in your feeling nature. And, that will, also then, open this third portal to now, which is what he calls like this dimension of stillness, this dimension of silence, still, and like if we become still, we can connect to it. So we have to, and it's like listening to silence or listening to stillness or tuning in, to perceive it. And one of the ways that I find interesting to perceive it is he talks about, how everything that exists, like in the forest, the trees, everything, it's arising, and you can actually palpably feel how it arises out of this dimension of stillness. So if you tune in energetically, deeply to the presence of the trees and the plants, and everything out there, the animals, you can feel how they exist in this, beautiful, field that, is of presence, and it arises out of, this kind of beautiful and peaceful dimension of stillness. And I think, it's the antidote that we need, to kind of drop into and reconnect with more and more for our fears, our, agitations, everything that is not still in our world these days. Um, so, yeah, I guess I um, didn't have quite as much material as I thought prepared for us, but I guess I could read maybe some of these examples of people's experiences on quests. So there's one that is just sort of the introduction here that helps us connect and feel this connection to the vastness of nature, which we don't recognize. We're not often in relationship to that, and it helps us. So it says, this is written by Atessa Dice. On the second night of my quest, I stretched out and laid back, filled with the most indescribable peace, staring up at the night sky aglow with a trillion stars. I started to feel utterly minute, with the cosmos stretched out above. Who is this I? What purpose does it have in the whole scheme of things? What was I about to find out about myself? What long-sought answers to questions will I receive? Intoxicated by the immediacy of nature and feeling as insignificant as a grain of sand, I drifted effortlessly into a deep sleep. All I knew for sure was that this quest, whatever else it may be, felt absolutely right for me in this moment. And so another example is Wilma Hartman, a communication consultant from South Africa, wrote to me about how her vision quest helped her to discover who she was and to realize the rhythms in her life. During my quest, I sensed a great awareness of cycles, cycles of day and night, of the sun, the moon, the sound of the tides, of the whale coming back every morning. I sensed my own rhythm. In one contradiction, things both slowed down and sped up. I was intensely aware of Great Spirit being the rhythmic heart pulsing inside me and in everything around me, everything being one. Looking back, my vision quest dreams leapt at me. They are still extremely vivid. One upon the other, they were like skins of fear being peeled away. My dreams were filled with anxiety, fear of change, fear of being rejected, fear of exploring the unknown. Bit by bit, I worked beyond the fear until I knew that the life I had was the one I wanted. It was no longer the boring life forced upon me by responsibility and sense of duty. I left the island with heightened perceptiveness, with inner strength, and a feeling of being part of a great universe. My arms could reach far and wide, like cool water being drawn through the center of a big, strong tree. I came back home, unable to give words to what I had experienced. So sometimes the quest can act as a catalyst for old issues to surface and heal. Lisa, an advertising executive in Hong Kong, had a very powerful emotional experience that began a healing process for her. And this was regarding, some childhood sexual abuse. And this is also kind of an interesting illustration of sometimes how, the quest doesn't go as planned, but then it's also, maybe more perfectly planned than what we realize. So she says, I got really angry about not having any water for most of the second day. I had a leaky water bottle. I stormed off my little hump of grass and stamped back to the lodge, thinking I was going to let everyone know just how unfair this water business was. I ranted at an assistant, and she burst into tears. And then I went to attack Denise. I hated her at this point. She said at this time that the water incident must hold a learning experience for me, that my anger must have a root in the past. No surprise, of course, she was right. Usually, rather than express my emotions in the form of tears, I would cry inside myself. I realized that having no water had been set up at some level to bring me face to face with the water issue, or more accurately, with the natural expression of my emotions. I had always been aware of my ability to leave my body in the times of pain, but did not understand the causes. Though I didn't know it at the time of the vision quest, the disconnection with my emotions was brought largely through early and forgotten sexual and emotional abuse. The vision quest was the stimulus for a period of exploration and discovery. It allowed me to come to terms with my emotional fragmentation and the integration of the different parts of me. The Vision Quest started a process by which I have worked through heaps of emotional stuff from my younger years. As a result of this work, 1 year later, the insights and way of viewing the universe that I gained have become increasingly integrated into my daily life. So, many people find that a vision quest helps them to overcome fear. Julie Robertson told me how the quest helped her to confront fear. She had a difficult time finding the right spot for her quest. Suddenly, I stumbled across a little clearing. It was about 9 feet around in a circle of trees, the perfect size for a medicine wheel. However, once she sat in her circle, she began to feel afraid. As late afternoon shadows lengthened with the approach of evening, Julie began to feel even more frightened. She heard many inexplicable sounds in the surrounding woods that froze her with terror. She told me that she was so scared she felt like she was in a waking nightmare. But then, as she accepted her fear, she began to understand the deeper significance of her quest. The fear was a catalyst for healing and forgiveness. As I stared in tired misery at a clump of nearby trees, I felt I was hallucinating. Then the pattern of a mottled feather appeared in the trees. I closed my eyes, reopened them, and the feather was still there. Slowly the face of a tawny owl formed over it. I realized that this was a message from Great Spirit, that the owl was my guide. At this point, I thought of everyone I'd wronged, apologized to them, and mentally hugged them. Then I thought of those who had wronged me, and I forgave them. Tears flowed as I experienced total forgiveness of my mother. The wind whispered through the trees, "You have done well." And then the trees all swayed gently above me, as if looking down and nodding in agreement. And so the process continues, which sprang from my vision quest. That was a time I shall remember forever. Sometimes a vision quest can carry you into mystic and wondrous realms. So I think we read that part. I think I mentioned that. So let me go ahead and read the story with it. So this occurred for Crystal Nicole, a young woman with a gentle demeanor. She arrived for the vision quest without a clear direction, but found that her quest opened her to something precious and magic inside herself. I didn't really know why I came to the vision quest. I just felt impelled. I spent most of the time on the island before the quest trying to come to terms with just being me. The negative me, the jealous me, the angry me, the petty me, the selfish me, and the frightened me. The first night of the vision quest, as I lay down to go to sleep, I felt very frightened of the dark. I was so scared that I even began to tremble as I lay down in my sleeping bag. And then I began hearing the delicate sounds of bells ringing, followed by the soft muffled sounds of a gong. I then heard voices coming close. My fear receded when I heard the voices. As I strained to hear what they were saying, I was amazed to hear the voices whispering my name. As I listened more intently, the voices became more distinct. I heard them say, "Don't be afraid, you are safe. We are here watching over you." The next thing I remember, it was morning, and deer were eating near the lake not far from my vision quest circle. Later that day at sunset, I heard breaking sticks behind me. I slowly turned around to see a beautiful, softly dappled doe standing on the moss-covered forest floor not far from my circle. She blinked. I closed my eyes and silently told her not to be afraid. When I opened them, she was still standing and watching me. Very slowly, very calmly, she walked closer. Hesitating for just a moment, she stepped into my circle and gently brought her face next to mine. I could smell her. I could feel her warmth, breath on my neck. I looked directly into her eyes, and she let me see her spirit. I let her into my heart. For a second it felt like our spirits were one, and I knew her totally, and she knew me. She showed me how to open my heart. She opened a pathway for the real me to start to grow, and for the first time in my life, I felt complete. So let's do one more. Um, and then, yeah, I think you're getting the idea. And again, every quest is, its own unique thing, with how it, is spun and woven through us and, for us and around us. So um, it can, always be considered exactly what you need, even when it wasn't what you were expecting or even what you wanted, right? Um, I know there was one quest that I did where it rained the whole time, and I was just like very miserable in that state. And in some ways, like I kind of broke the tradition of the quest and, you know, went in and received some comfort from the quest guide, and you know got a little warmer and stuff like that. So one of the things that I learned from that, like we have the rules, and it would have been a different quest experience had I, sort of force marched myself through the resistance, and maybe I could have even surrendered at a deeper level. I'm sure that that's always possible, but I think we're also, needing to honor our own pace and timing, and like if we find that the resistance is strong, and sometimes I think it's appropriate just to allow and honor that part of us that's not ready yet in whatever way. So I've done others since then, and they're always very useful, and I love the fact that I can sort of just be present to what my next thing is. Now, these quests, I think, were done in a medicine wheel, circle, which is also a little more of a traditional and limiting, rigorous kind of experience in a quest where you build a medicine wheel around you, and for the full time you stay within that circle. um, I found when I very first got here, I had so much pent up energy. I was working for 10 years in a prison system, and I didn't understand exactly how much of a medium I was at that time, but, like I was on the quest, like there's no way I could sit still. And I had my two dogs and the neighbor's dog with me, so we were kind of a pack, and that was the first time I had been here at this land, and so I was just exploring the Nature Conservancy land all around, and it was like a quest of exploration of this new space, sacred space that I was inhabiting, and so it was interesting because I just kept walking for like 3 days, and it took 3 days, and then I could feel the shift, like whatever that tension, whatever that, sort of revness in my field that, had been building, and kind of how we don't understand because we don't have contrast, like we don't really recognize how living in our kind of fast-paced world is affecting us, and so like by the third day I really felt the shift, and again that 3 day effect and this kind of other way of being in the world I think comes in. um, but it's also, even if it's just a quest for enjoying nature and peace and quiet, then you can just really have a beautiful time, like following your natural attractions, and exploring whatever, seems to call out to you with its beauty or its particular interesting shape, or, so it's a kind of almost a labyrinth walk down the creek, following whatever is calling you in the moment, and you wake up and, oh, what am I going to do now? What is my, movement in this moment? Do I want to lay in bed for a little while longer and just listen, do I want to get up? And so there's these kind of just moment to moment processes of, who am I now and what do I want? And a kind of learning to just be deeply intuitive with the flow of your impulses and see where they carry you. So all of that, is a part of the beauty of kind of setting aside some kind of time for yourself like this. So let me read one more example here. So, uh, a vision quest can allow you to experience everyday life in a new and vibrant way. Jana Bristow, a dental technician, found in the silence of the night a power that enriched her day-to-day life. On the second night, I had quite a rough time. I had tapped into all sorts of shadowlands and found myself feeling immensely small and lonely, cold and very hungry. I have never felt so exposed and so tremendously alone. Time stood still, and the night seemed to stretch on forever. I was scared, but couldn't understand what really frightened me. The darkness sought me out and exposed me. I sensed I was being watched by the trees, the rocks, the sky, and all the creatures I could not see. The silence was excruciating. I can imagine how some people feel they are losing their sanity when there's just no sound. As I lay there in darkness, unable to move or to distract my mind, I began to connect with the beauty of the silence. It made me tearful just telling of it. I never want to lose it. Now I can be in the midst of everyday hectic life, and I'm able to tune into my inner self, knowing that the great depth of silence is not lost. After a few hours, scenes of incredible beauty, mountains, rolling hills, lush green valleys, deep blue lakes, and powerful waterfalls filled my vision. I had entered an altered state of consciousness. It was incredibly soothing and comforting to be able to connect to the spirit world with such ease. I never thought it possible. I then fell asleep for a short while just before dawn. So I think that kind of illustrates a good principle too, that it's kind of like by descending, through into the silence that, we come into these more visionary states and these altered states of consciousness. And often, to get there, we're going through this kind of descent and into the shadows and a passage through that. And like I said, that's where, you know if we can stay the course, I think we can go to this other level. So I guess we're at our time now, and so I hope this was a interesting, kind of exploration for you, and uh, to consider, like taking this time out for yourself, um, and really allowing yourself to um, uh, take care and discover these inner depths of our being. you know and I do some preparatory work. The deep listening and soul whispering is always a good way to sit and be in our inner spaces, within ourselves, and that can be very useful on the quest. And then my forest bathing uh, programs, and all of that also kind of just teach how to be present in a sensory way with nature. So we'll hopefully be coming into the spring, and keep connected with my uh, Humanitics links, or on my website. If you go, you can follow me on my events there. Also, I have a meetup that I try to keep up with the events, but the best place is on my website. And if you want to be notified, if you go to the bottom of any of the events that are listed there, you can find a place where you can click on, following me. And then that way, when I post something new, it'll be there. So, and, coming up, I mean, we actually have a forest bathing program for the winter scheduled this Sunday, but it looks like once again we may be getting a nor'easter or some kind of weather event through here. So I'm not sure we're quite there yet for those kind of adventures. And again, it's fine to do them in winter in the in the snows or whatever, but traffic around here and just getting around is sort of treacherous when it gets like that. So hopefully we will be in a new spring soon. And you know it's a beautiful thing to watch the transition of the seasons, and to come frequently if you're local, and you can do that, because there's to have a sense of place somewhere, to visit over the time is a really a good friend, a beautiful connection to have. Okay, so thank